Apache girl hung upside down in the desert, a cowboy unties her, then discovers her secret. The sun was high and fierce, burning down on the endless stretches of desert that seemed to go on forever. The ground shimmered with heat, and the air was dry and sharp. Clayton Hayes, a seasoned cowboy, rode steadily across the sand and rocky terrain, his horse's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. Clayton was used to long, lonely rides, the kind where only the wind and the occasional buzzard kept him company. But today, as he guided his horse around a cluster of jagged rocks, he felt a strange tension in the air, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Clayton squinted against the sunlight. The landscape was mostly bare, dotted with cacti and low shrubs, but something ahead made him slow down. At first, it looked like a piece of driftwood sticking out of the sand, but as he got closer, he realized it was something far more unusual. Dangling from a wooden frame tied between two cacti was a young girl, hanging upside down. Her hair hung in the hot wind, matted with dust, and her clothes were torn in places. Clayton felt a sudden rush of alarm and fear. He had never seen anything like this in all his years in the desert. He dismounted quickly, his boots sinking slightly into the hot sand. "Hey, are you all right?" he called, keeping his voice calm so as not to startle her. There was no immediate response, just the faint rasp of her breathing and the occasional whisper of the wind. Clayton approached slowly, his eyes scanning her body for injuries. She appeared weak, almost unconscious, but her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, which was a small relief. Clayton knelt beside her, careful not to make sudden movements. His hands were skilled from years of working with ropes on cattle, and he quickly assessed the knots that held her. They were rough and tight, but he could undo them with patience and care. As he worked, he noticed her clothing, a mix of traditional Apache patterns with some modern garments. It was unusual, and Clayton felt a flicker of curiosity about her story. Why was she here alone in the desert? Who had left her hanging like this? Finally, the knots loosened, and the girl slipped from the ropes into Clayton's arms. He laid her gently on the sand, checking her for signs of serious injury. She was thin, her skin sunburned and dry from the desert heat, but she was alive. Clayton offered her water from his canteen, holding it to her lips until she drank a little. She coughed softly, sputtering out a few words, but they didn't make sense. Clayton frowned, realizing that her fear and exhaustion made it difficult for her to speak clearly. He stayed with her, shaded by his hat from the blazing sun, and tried to calm her. "It's all right. You're safe now," he said gently. "I'm Clayton. I'll help you." The girl's eyes were wide, wary, and scanning the horizon as if expecting someone else to appear. Clayton realized that she was not just tired or hurt, she was terrified, like someone had taught her not to trust anyone. After a few moments, the girl managed to whisper a name, Naomi. Clayton repeated it softly, trying to remember. Naomi. That was a start. He offered her a piece of dried bread he had in his saddlebag, and she took it hesitantly. Her movements were slow, careful, as if she were afraid that even a small gesture could bring danger. Clayton studied her closely. Despite her fragile appearance, there was a quiet strength about her, a determination that made him think she had survived worse than this desert. He looked around at the desert again, scanning for any signs of the people who had left her here. There were no tracks except those of animals and his own horse. The place felt abandoned, except for the strange presence of Naomi herself. Clayton felt a mix of worry and determination. Whoever had done this to her would not be easy to track, but for now, he had to focus on keeping her alive. Clayton built a small shade from a piece of cloth and some branches, creating a tiny shelter for Naomi out of the scorching sun. He gave her more water and encouraged her to rest while he kept watch. She finally lay down, curling slightly, her eyes half closed but not completely asleep. Clayton could see her chest rising and falling slowly, the rhythm of life returning after such a frightening ordeal. As the afternoon wore on, Clayton tried to learn more about Naomi, but she remained silent, only responding with small nods or shakes of her head. He didn't push her. He knew from experience that trust could not be forced, and she had likely learned the hard way that speaking too quickly could bring trouble. He waited patiently, telling her stories of his childhood on the frontier, of cattle drives, horses, and the harsh lessons the desert had taught him. He spoke slowly, in a calm and steady voice, hoping the sound of his words would soothe her and make her feel safe. By evening, Naomi seemed slightly more relaxed. She watched Clayton as he prepared a small fire, the flames flickering and casting shadows across the desert floor. Clayton cooked a little dried meat, and the smell seemed to bring her out of her silence for a brief moment. She ate cautiously, but she ate, and that was progress. He noticed the tattered journal tucked inside her satchel. It looked worn, old, and important. Clayton's curiosity grew. Whatever her story was, it involved more than just being lost in the desert. The night fell quickly, colder than the day, and the desert took on a still, almost haunting quiet. Stars appeared in the sky, endless and brilliant. Clayton kept the fire small but steady, sitting near Naomi to make sure she stayed warm. She huddled under a blanket, eyes wide as she stared at the firelight. Clayton wondered about her family, about how she had ended up in such a dangerous situation, and whether they were looking for her. He decided that they would need to travel at first light. He could not leave her here alone, not with the dangers of the desert, snakes, scorpions, and the heat itself. Clayton resolved to help her find safety, but he knew the journey would be difficult. He didn't yet know if she would trust him enough to travel with him, but for now, he simply stayed by her side, giving her the care and protection she needed. Hours passed, and Naomi finally drifted into a fitful sleep. Clayton watched over her, thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A lone cowboy, riding the desert alone, and a young girl, suspended in danger, now sharing a small fire under the stars. Clayton felt a mixture of awe, responsibility, and a quiet hope that somehow together they could survive what the desert had in store. As the night deepened, the wind whispered through the cacti, and Clayton's mind raced with questions. Who had left Naomi in the desert? Why her? What secrets did she carry in that old journal? He did not know, but he promised himself that he would find out, and he would not leave her alone. The desert was vast and merciless, but in that small circle of firelight, trust was beginning to form. Clayton realized that saving Naomi was only the first step in a journey neither of them could yet imagine. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, painting the desert in soft gold and pink, Naomi stirred. Clayton offered her water and she drank, her eyes meeting his with a flicker of recognition. For the first time she spoke clearly, her voice quiet but firm. "Thank you," she said. Clayton nodded, offering a reassuring smile. He did not need words to understand. Her survival depended on trust, courage, and a partnership that was just beginning. With the sun rising, Clayton helped Naomi to her feet. They packed what little belongings she had, including the worn journal, and prepared to ride out together. The desert stretched endlessly before them, full of danger, mystery, and hope. Clayton knew that their journey would be challenging, but he also knew that he could not turn back now. Naomi's story was far from over, and he had a role to play in it. As they rode into the growing light of day, the first part of their adventure in the desert was only just beginning. The morning sun rose slowly, spilling gold across the desert, and Clayton helped Naomi to her feet. She moved cautiously, still weak from her ordeal, but there was determination in her steps. Clayton handed her the reins of his horse, and she held them carefully, as if afraid of making a mistake. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned the horizon constantly. The desert was a harsh teacher, and Naomi had learned its lessons well. Clayton, used to its challenges, respected her awareness. They rode side by side, the horse's hooves crunching on the dry sand. Clayton kept a steady pace, speaking occasionally to reassure Naomi. "We'll take it slow," he said. "There's no need to hurry. The desert isn't going anywhere, and neither am I." Naomi nodded, saying nothing, but he could see a faint trust beginning to grow in her eyes. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a mix of rocky outcrops, sparse vegetation, and shimmering heat waves that rose from the sand like mirages. Clayton had learned to read the land. He noticed tracks of small animals, the shape of clouds, and the distant shimmer of a possible water source. Naomi, despite her young age, moved with surprising skill. She guided her horse carefully through rocky patches, choosing paths that Clayton might have overlooked. It became clear that she knew the desert better than most outsiders, a fact that impressed Clayton deeply. He began to realize that Naomi was not just a girl in trouble. She was someone who had survived hardships far beyond what most could imagine. As the sun climbed higher, they stopped by a small outcrop of rocks for shade. Clayton offered Naomi some water, and she drank slowly, taking care to conserve each drop. He noticed her glancing at the worn journal tucked in her satchel. He felt a surge of curiosity, but he didn't push her. Clayton had learned over the years that forcing someone to reveal secrets often pushed them away. Patience, he knew, was the key to trust. While Naomi rested, Clayton scanned the horizon. The desert seemed empty, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching. He had learned from experience that danger could appear in many forms, sometimes hidden, sometimes unexpected. He adjusted the reins of his horse and kept a hand near his holster, not because he expected trouble immediately, but because the desert had taught him caution. After a short break, they continued riding. Clayton asked gentle questions about Naomi, about her journey and where she was from, but she remained quiet, offering only small fragments. She mentioned her family, her home, but refused to go into detail. Clayton respected her silence, understanding that fear could be a powerful force. He focused instead on keeping them moving safely through the desert, choosing paths with water sources, shade, and safe footing for the horses. As they rode, Naomi finally began to open up in small ways. She described her escape, how she had been taken from her family by someone she had thought would help her. That person had abandoned her in the desert as a warning, leaving her to survive on her own. Clayton listened carefully, nodding, asking no judgmental questions. He could feel the weight of her story, the courage it had taken for her to survive. Her voice, though quiet, carried strength, and he felt a growing respect for the young girl who had endured so much. During a brief pause near a cluster of cacti, Naomi showed Clayton how she had found water in a small, hidden stream. She knelt by the sand, moving aside rocks and dust, revealing the trickle of clear water beneath. Clayton watched, impressed by her skill. It was not just survival instinct. It was knowledge passed down through generations. Naomi had learned how to read the desert like a map, how to find life where others would see only danger. Clayton offered her more water from his canteen, and she accepted gratefully, her eyes reflecting both exhaustion and determination. The journey was not easy. The sun grew hotter, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly. Rocks scraped the horses' hooves, and the wind carried sand into their faces. Clayton guided Naomi through the challenges, teaching her small tricks he had learned over years in the desert: how to find shade, how to avoid loose rocks, and how to ride in ways that conserved energy. Naomi, despite her small frame and youth, kept up with surprising resilience. Clayton could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had kept her alive until now. As the afternoon passed, Naomi finally spoke about the journal she carried. She explained that it belonged to her family and contained secrets that were not meant for just anyone. Clayton listened carefully, sensing the importance of the information. Naomi's voice was quiet, almost reverent, as she described the journal as a guide, a record of her family's history and knowledge of sacred lands. Clayton felt a sense of awe. This young girl, alone in the desert, carried something far more significant than mere survival. She carried heritage, memory, and responsibility. Clayton realized that protecting Naomi meant more than guiding her through the desert. It meant understanding the value of what she carried and respecting the trust she had placed in him by allowing him to help her. He felt a responsibility that went beyond mere duty. It was a promise to keep her safe and to respect the secrets she held. As the sun began to sink, casting long shadows across the sand, they stopped again to rest. Clayton built a small fire, careful not to draw attention from anyone who might be watching. Naomi sat quietly, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. For a moment, the harsh desert seemed to fade away, replaced by a small circle of warmth and light. Clayton could sense her hesitancy, the way she remained alert despite the comfort of the fire. He spoke softly, telling stories of his youth, of cattle drives and long nights under the stars. Slowly, Naomi listened, allowing herself a small measure of relaxation. That night, the desert became a tapestry of stars, stretching endlessly overhead. Clayton watched Naomi sleep, her breathing even, and thought about the journey that lay ahead. The path to safety would be long, full of challenges, but he knew that together they could face them. Naomi's courage, combined with his experience, gave him confidence that they could survive whatever the desert had in store. He thought about the journal again, wondering what secrets it held. Naomi had only revealed fragments, enough to show that her story was larger than her own survival. Clayton realized that her escape was only the beginning, and that their journey would take them into places neither of them could predict. Yet, he felt a strange sense of peace. In the vastness of the desert, he had found someone worth protecting, someone whose story deserved to be told. Morning came again with a soft glow across the desert. Naomi awoke quietly and Clayton offered her water and breakfast. She ate slowly, cautious but grateful. He noticed her studying the horizon, her eyes sharp and alert. The fear from the previous day had not vanished, but there was a flicker of trust growing. Clayton felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the small steps they took each day were building the foundation for something more than mere survival. As they mounted their horses, Clayton offered gentle guidance, reminding Naomi to pace herself and to pay attention to the land. The desert was unforgiving, but he had faith in her ability to navigate it. They rode side by side, the wind carrying the scent of dust and sagebrush. Clayton could see the determination in Naomi's posture, the way she moved with confidence despite her youth. He realized that she was not just a survivor, she was a fighter, someone who had endured more than most people could imagine. By midday, they reached a small canyon that offered shade and water. Naomi knelt by the stream, carefully collecting water and examining the plants nearby. Clayton watched silently, impressed by her skill and knowledge. He realized that this journey was teaching him as much as it was teaching her. The desert demanded respect, patience, and observation, and Naomi had all three in abundance. Clayton felt a growing sense of connection to Naomi. She had entrusted him with her safety, and he had accepted that responsibility. The desert was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but together they had found a rhythm. Each step, each mile brought them closer not just to safety, but to understanding, trust, and perhaps even friendship. As the day faded and the shadows grew long, Clayton knew that the desert would not give up its challenges easily. But he also knew that Naomi was capable of facing them, and that he could guide her through them. The journey was far from over, but for the first time since finding her, Clayton felt hope. They were no longer just a cowboy and a girl. They were partners in survival, bound by trust and courage, moving forward together into the vast, unforgiving desert. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a golden sea of sand and rock under the blazing sun. Clayton and Naomi rode side by side, their horses moving steadily over the uneven ground. The journey had grown more challenging since morning. Rocks jutted up from the sand like teeth, and the air shimmered with heat, making it hard to tell where solid ground ended and mirage began. Clayton kept glancing at Naomi, noting her concentration and careful movements. She was no ordinary girl. She moved with purpose and skill, almost as if the desert itself had taught her how to survive. Naomi carried her journal tightly in her satchel, occasionally glancing at it as they rode. Clayton had noticed its worn edges and the care with which she treated it. Something about that book clearly mattered deeply to her. Clayton did not pry, but he felt a curiosity growing stronger with each passing mile. Whoever had abandoned her in the desert had wanted something, and Clayton was determined to see that she reached safety first. As they navigated a narrow canyon, the sun climbed higher, turning the rocks a fiery orange. Naomi slowed her horse and pointed to a faint trail leading toward a hidden oasis. Clayton followed her carefully, impressed by her knowledge of the desert's hidden secrets. It was small, barely more than a trickle of water, but it was enough to give both their horses a chance to drink. Naomi knelt by the stream, filling her canteen and carefully inspecting the surrounding plants. Clayton watched silently, realizing that she knew more about the desert's resources than most adults he had met. Once the horses had rested, they continued their journey. Clayton noticed that Naomi's eyes were sharper now, scanning for signs of trouble in the distance. He had learned over the years that the desert could hide dangers in plain sight: snakes, wild animals, and even human threats. Naomi's awareness suggested that she had faced danger before. Clayton felt a mix of admiration and concern. Her skills were remarkable, but he knew that being alone had taught her to rely only on herself. His challenge was to help her see that she could trust him as well. Hours passed under the relentless sun. They rode through stretches of open desert, the heat pressing down, making each step feel heavier. Naomi finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I can't go back the way I came," she said quietly. "They'll be looking for me there. I need to reach the hidden valley. It's safe there." Clayton glanced at her, curiosity and concern mixed in his eyes. "Hidden valley?" he asked. Naomi nodded, her expression serious. "It's where my people used to live, where I can be safe and where the journal belongs." Clayton's heart sank slightly. He realized that her journey was far more than just escaping the desert. It was a race to protect her family's heritage. He didn't fully understand the importance of the journal yet, but he knew it must be significant for Naomi to carry it so carefully. He nodded, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "Then we'll get you there." Together, Naomi gave a small, hesitant smile, a flicker of trust in her eyes. As they moved deeper into the desert, the terrain grew harsher. Jagged rocks and deep sand slowed their progress. Clayton noticed Naomi struggling slightly to keep her balance, and he suggested small breaks, offering water and shade whenever possible. During one of these pauses, Naomi finally opened her satchel and showed Clayton a few pages of the journal. The writing was intricate, a mixture of words and sketches, showing maps, symbols, and notes about the land. Clayton could see that it was not just a diary, it was a guide, a record of knowledge that had been passed down through generations. Naomi's voice trembled slightly as she explained. "This journal, it has the secret of our land, our people's history, our family's legacy. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could be lost forever." Clayton listened carefully, realizing the weight of responsibility she carried. This young girl, barely a teenager, had survived desert heat, danger, and abandonment to protect something far more valuable than life itself. He felt a surge of respect and determination. Protecting Naomi meant protecting her history, her people, and her secrets. The day grew hotter, and the desert seemed to stretch endlessly. They rode slowly, choosing paths with more shade and softer ground. Naomi occasionally pointed out plants and signs of water, teaching Clayton small details he had never noticed before. She explained which plants were safe to eat, how to find moisture hidden under rocks, and even how to read subtle shifts in the sand to detect animal tracks. Clayton realized that the desert had shaped her into a skilled, intelligent survivor, and he marveled at her abilities. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast expanse. Clayton paused, looking at the view. The hidden valley Naomi had spoken of was somewhere beyond the ridge, shielded by hills and distant cliffs. Naomi's eyes lit up as she recognized familiar landmarks, and Clayton felt a sense of awe. She had not just survived the desert, she had navigated it, relying on knowledge, instinct, and courage. The last stretch of their journey proved the most challenging. The terrain became steeper, and loose rocks made the ride dangerous. Clayton went first, carefully testing the ground, while Naomi followed closely behind. At one point, Naomi's horse slipped slightly on a steep incline, and Clayton quickly reached her, steadying both her and the horse. She looked at him, gratitude and relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Clayton nodded. "We're getting there," he said, "just a little further." Night fell quickly, bringing cool relief from the day's heat but also new challenges. The desert was dark and every shadow could hide danger. Clayton built a small fire, just enough to provide warmth and light, while Naomi sat nearby, examining the journal by its glow. The flickering light revealed more sketches, more maps and notes about sacred places, water sources, and ancestral landmarks. Clayton realized that the journey was more than physical. It was a test of trust, courage, and endurance. Naomi's secret, carefully protected, was a beacon guiding them forward. Around the fire, Clayton spoke softly, telling stories of his own life, long rides, harsh winters, and moments of solitude that taught him patience and resilience. Naomi listened, her body relaxing slightly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She began to share fragments of her own story, telling Clayton about her family, the lessons they had taught her, and the importance of keeping the journal safe. Her voice, though quiet, carried a weight of responsibility and wisdom beyond her years. Clayton felt a deep respect for her, realizing that courage and strength could take many forms, and that Naomi embodied both. The following morning, they continued their journey with renewed determination. Naomi led the way, guiding Clayton along trails she knew, avoiding open areas where danger could lurk. Clayton followed closely, noting her instincts, her knowledge, and her careful observation of every detail in the landscape. The desert was unforgiving, but together they moved with a rhythm, a silent understanding that grew stronger with each mile. During a brief rest by a small spring, Naomi finally spoke more about the journal. "It tells the story of my people," she said, her voice steady. "It shows where sacred places are hidden, where our ancestors lived, and how to survive here. Some people would do anything to get it. That's why I had to leave. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands." Clayton listened, understanding the gravity of her words. He realized that their journey was not just about reaching safety. It was about protecting something far more significant than either of them could carry alone. The journey grew harder as the day wore on. Loose sand, steep inclines, and scorching heat tested both horse and rider. Clayton offered encouragement, guiding Naomi through difficult stretches, and she followed, trusting his experience. Together, they overcame obstacles, navigating the desert with a combination of skill, courage, and patience. Clayton marveled at Naomi's endurance, her sharp mind, and her ability to adapt. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, despite the challenges the desert threw at her. By late afternoon, they reached a high point overlooking the hidden valley. Clayton could see what Naomi had been describing, a secluded area, shielded by hills and cliffs, with patches of greenery, water, and shelter. Naomi's eyes sparkled with recognition and relief. She had survived the desert, protected her family's secret, and now, finally, reached a place where she could be safe. Clayton felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that their journey, while far from over, had brought them to the brink of safety. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land, Clayton and Naomi rode down into the valley. The terrain was gentler here, the air cooler, and the sense of danger faded slightly. Naomi guided him through the valley, pointing out areas where her ancestors had lived, where water was abundant, and where shelter could be found. Clayton followed, amazed at the knowledge she possessed and the care with which she preserved it. Night fell in the valley and the stars appeared once again, brilliant against the dark sky. Clayton and Naomi settled near a small spring, the journal safely tucked away. Naomi finally allowed herself to relax completely, a small smile crossing her face. Clayton felt a deep respect for her courage, wisdom, and resilience. Together, they had survived the desert, overcome challenges, and grown stronger through trust and partnership. Clayton knew that the journey was not yet complete, but he also knew that Naomi's secret, her heritage, and her courage were safe for now. The hidden valley offered shelter, resources, and the promise of protection. As they rested, Clayton realized that their bond had grown beyond necessity. It was built on trust, shared hardship, and the recognition of strength in one another. Naomi had survived the desert, and together, they had reached a turning point, one that would lead them to the final revelation of her secret and the fulfillment of their journey. The morning sun bathed the hidden valley in soft gold, and the air was filled with the gentle sound of water trickling through small streams. Clayton and Naomi awoke to a sense of peace they had not felt since their journey began. The desert outside the valley's shelter had been harsh and unforgiving, but here, surrounded by green patches, shaded rocks, and distant cliffs, there was safety. Naomi's eyes shone as she looked around, recognizing the landmarks of her ancestors, the places her family had once called home. Clayton observed her quietly, realizing that this valley was not just a refuge. It was a sacred place, a connection to history, heritage, and survival. Naomi led Clayton along a narrow path that wound around a small hill, stopping occasionally to point out subtle signs in the landscape. "These rocks mark the edge of where my people lived," she said softly. "The streams, the plants, everything here has meaning. Every hill, every tree is part of our story." Clayton listened attentively, impressed by her knowledge and reverence for the land. It was clear that Naomi had grown up with these lessons, learning to see the world not just as a place to survive, but as a place to honor. Finally, they arrived at a sheltered grove at the heart of the valley. Here, Naomi carefully opened her satchel and removed the worn journal. She held it close, almost reverently, and began to speak, her voice steady now, filled with purpose. "This journal belongs to my family," she said. "It contains the locations of sacred places, our ancestors' teachings, and knowledge that has been passed down for generations. It shows how to survive, yes, but it also shows the history of my people, the things we must protect." Clayton leaned in, understanding for the first time the full weight of what Naomi had been carrying through the desert. She turned a few pages, revealing carefully drawn maps, sketches of plants, and notes about hidden springs and shelters. "There are people who would try to take this," Naomi continued. "They want it for themselves without understanding its value. That is why I had to leave, why I had to survive on my own in the desert. The knowledge in this journal is more important than my own safety." Clayton felt a deep respect for her bravery. He had faced many dangers in his life, but he had never encountered someone so young yet so determined to protect the legacy of her people. Clayton gently suggested, "We need to make sure this information stays safe. Maybe it should be hidden somewhere only those who respect it can find it." Naomi nodded, looking thoughtful. "Yes," she said, "that's what my ancestors would have wanted. We must protect it so it can survive for generations to come." She carefully closed the journal and tucked it back into her satchel, her movements deliberate and respectful. Clayton could see that her commitment was not just to her own survival, but to the memory and safety of those who had come before her. Over the next several hours, Naomi guided Clayton through the valley, showing him small caves, shaded areas, and hidden streams. Each place had a story, and she told him little by little, her voice calm and confident. Clayton listened, amazed at the depth of knowledge she carried, the skill with which she moved through the land, and the care she showed for every plant and rock. He realized that the desert had made her strong, but this valley had given her purpose, a place to protect, a reason to survive, and a connection to her past. They stopped for a brief rest near a spring, and Clayton offered Naomi some water. She drank slowly, then looked at him, a quiet trust in her eyes. "Thank you for helping me," she said softly. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Clayton smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest. "You would have," he said. "I just helped you along the way." "You're stronger than you know." Naomi's expression softened, a small smile breaking across her face. For the first time in a long while, there was no fear in her eyes, only determination and a sense of relief. As they prepared to set up a small camp for the night, Naomi shared more of her story. She spoke of her family, their traditions, and the importance of keeping their knowledge safe. Clayton listened, realizing that her escape from the desert was only part of a much larger journey. Naomi's survival had been a test of courage and resilience, but her ultimate challenge was to protect the secrets of her people, to ensure that their history remained intact. Clayton felt honored to be part of her journey, to witness the strength and wisdom of someone so young yet so capable. Night fell in the valley, and the stars shone brightly overhead, mirrored by the clear streams below. Clayton and Naomi sat near the fire, the journal safely tucked away. The air was cool, and for the first time since their desert crossing began, there was a sense of peace. Clayton realized that this moment was not just the end of their journey but also a beginning, a chance for Naomi to continue her family's legacy, and for him to witness a remarkable story of survival, trust, and courage. Naomi finally shared the full secret with Clayton. "The journal isn't just maps and survival tips," she said. "It contains the locations of sacred artifacts, places my ancestors protected for generations. Some of these places are hidden, and some hold knowledge that could be lost forever if the wrong people find it. That is why I had to survive, why I had to keep it safe. If anything happened to me, this knowledge would have been in danger." Clayton nodded, understanding the gravity of her responsibility. He realized that their journey through the desert had been far more than a physical challenge. It had been a test of trust, courage, and the protection of something priceless. Clayton helped Naomi carefully move through the valley, marking safe paths and suggesting ways to keep the journal hidden. Naomi listened, her respect for his experience clear, but she was confident in her own knowledge. Together, they devised a plan to ensure that the sacred locations remained secret, hidden from those who would misuse them. Clayton felt a deep satisfaction. He had helped her survive, but more importantly, he had helped protect something much greater than either of them. The following days were spent exploring the valley and ensuring that the journal and its secrets were safe. Naomi moved with purpose, confident in her ability to navigate the land and protect what was sacred. Clayton supported her, offering guidance where needed and learning from her expertise. They discovered hidden springs, caves, and shaded groves, each place marked carefully in Naomi's journal. Clayton marveled at her dedication and the knowledge she had preserved, understanding that this young girl carried the weight of generations on her shoulders. One afternoon, as they rested near a stream, Naomi finally allowed herself to reflect on the journey. "I was so scared when I was left in the desert," she said quietly, "but I survived, and now I know that I can protect what matters. I understand my strength, and I know that I am not alone." Clayton nodded, feeling a sense of pride and admiration. "You are stronger than anyone could imagine," he said. and you have a purpose that will guide you for the rest of your life." Naomi smiled, a small but genuine expression, and Clayton knew that the bond formed in the desert had transformed into something lasting: trust, respect, and friendship. As night fell once more, they sat together under the stars. Naomi looked at the clear sky and spoke softly. "The desert was harsh, but it taught me many things. It showed me my strength, my resilience, and my determination. And it brought you into my life, someone who believed in me and helped me survive." Clayton listened, moved by her words. He realized that this journey had changed them both. Naomi had survived the desert, protected her family's secrets, and discovered her own strength. Clayton had witnessed courage in its purest form, and had become part of a story that would last for generations. Finally, Naomi carefully placed the journal in a hidden nook within the valley, ensuring that it was safe, secure, and protected from those who might seek it for the wrong reasons. Clayton helped her mark safe paths, so that only someone who understood the land could access it. Naomi looked at him, gratitude and determination in her eyes. "It's safe now," she said softly. Clayton nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Together, they had ensured that the legacy of her people would survive, that the knowledge of generations would remain intact, and that the courage of a young girl had been honored. As the night deepened, Clayton and Naomi sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the valley, the gentle rush of water, the wind rustling through leaves, and the distant call of animals. The desert outside remained harsh and unyielding, but within this hidden valley, there was peace, safety, and the promise of a future protected by wisdom, courage, and trust. Naomi smiled, feeling a sense of relief and accomplishment. She had survived the desert, kept her family's secrets safe, and discovered her own strength along the way. Clayton felt the same sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had helped someone remarkable and had witnessed the power of resilience, knowledge, and bravery. The story of their journey would not be told widely, for Naomi's secret was too important, too sacred to share with anyone who might misuse it. But the memory of the desert, the hidden valley, and the bond formed between a young Apache girl and a lone cowboy would remain, a testament to courage, trust, and the power of the human spirit. Clayton looked at Naomi and realized that some journeys were not just about survival. They were about understanding, protecting, and honoring the legacy of those who came before. Naomi had done all of this, and he had been fortunate to help her along the way. As dawn approached, the valley bathed once again in soft morning light. Naomi felt ready to continue protecting her heritage. Clayton prepared to leave, knowing that his role had been crucial, but that Naomi's strength would guide her forward. They shared a quiet farewell, filled with respect and gratitude. Clayton rode away, leaving Naomi in the hidden valley, her journal safe, her secret protected, and her courage stronger than ever. In the end, the desert had tested them, shaped them, and revealed truths that could not be learned anywhere else. Naomi had survived, protected her family's legacy, and discovered the depth of her own strength. Clayton had witnessed bravery and wisdom in a young girl, and had helped preserve something priceless. Together, they had faced the desert and emerged stronger, their journey a quiet but powerful story of survival, trust, and the protection of what truly matters.